This is the third video for ethics and legal considerations for animal chiropractic. In this video, we're going to talk very generally about the licensing rules, regulations, general overview of what those rules require. We'll talk more specifically about the rules state by state when we get to the next video. A couple things I want to say before I start talking about the rules. Many of you are going to think the rules are wrong. Especially as I go through state by state, I can almost guarantee that all of you will find that some of the rules don't agree with your personal beliefs. If you're a chiropractor, you may believe that chiropractors should have direct access to animal patients with very little supervision, if any supervision, required from a veterinarian. On the other hand, if you're a veterinarian, you may believe that chiropractors should have very limited access to patients and have that access only through veterinarians. I'm not here to tell you which answer is correct. I think you'll see both answers as we go through the specific states. And as you react to these rules, I want to, just kind of share a couple general thoughts. The first is the one from Buddha. Holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. So you can get angry about the rules. You may be unhappy about the rules, and that's okay. But you're not going to hurt the people who made the rules. On the other hand, you can take that energy, that anger, and focus it into activities, into action to try to change or improve the rules. Which brings us to the next quote from William Arthur Ward. Pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The realist adjusts the sails. So make adjustments. Whatever the rules require, make adjustments to follow those rules. And if you think the rules are wrong, then make adjustments to try to get those rules changed. Which kind of brings us to the next quote from Maya Angelou. If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. If you realize that the rules are not going to change, if you are unable to develop enough political willpower or enough political capital to make those changes, then the rules are what they are. And you just need to change your attitude towards those rules and comply with those rules rather than try to ignore them or try to pretend that they're not there or just waste your energy being angry about the rules that you don't agree with. So the bottom line goal of these regulations, and I think this is universally true from every state, is the primary goal is to protect the animals and to protect members of the public. They want to make sure that the people who are caring for the animals are properly trained and qualified. So veterinarians need to be properly educated, properly licensed and tested to verify that they have the knowledge and skills to provide the care that we expect them to be able to provide for animals. And I think the same thing needs to be true for animal chiropractic. We need to specify what training and qualifications are expected. The regulations will also require informed consent. Educating the client about the care that you are providing, about the results they can expect, and about the alternatives or more traditional care that may be available for the condition that the patient may have. Rules also are going to require honest advertising. Bottom line rule for advertising is that it cannot be false, misleading, or deceptive. Now, different boards will interpret false, misleading, and deceptive in different ways, but that's the general principle that they will start out with. And then these regulations also attempt to provide for quality of care. They set up rules that can provide for malpractice claims or claims for, not claims, but sanctions against a license for conduct that would be malpractice. They'll also set up some requirements for record keeping. And some of the rules for veterinary care are very specific about what needs to be contained in the records. So I told the chiropractors be thankful that HIPAA doesn't apply to confidentiality rules. But you also have a different set of rules when you're working with animals. And in some ways, these rules are much more specific about what needs to be included in the records than the rules you typically see when you're working with human patients. So the first question is being trained and qualified. I think this is probably the primary question that we're dealing with today. Who can provide chiropractic adjustments or musculoskeletal manipulations to animals? Veterinarians have a very broad license. And I think it's generally going to be the principle, if not universally the principle, that anyone with a veterinary medical license can adjust animals, even though they may not have had any training in providing chiropractic adjustments, even though they may not have any experience in providing chiropractic adjustments. And I think that is a dangerous situation to be in, to tell the veterinarian that they are responsible for providing care only when they're properly trained and qualified, and leaving them as the gatekeepers to decide what properly trained and qualified means. I think it makes more sense for the states to determine whether any additional education or training is required for veterinarians to provide chiropractic care to animals. Now, the second question is for chiropractors. I think what chiropractors would like to have, what many chiropractors would like to have, is direct access to patients so that patients can come directly to chiropractors. They can be, or the clients can come directly to chiropractors with their patients, and the chiropractors can treat those animals without any intervention or supervision by a veterinarian. Yeah, I think the authorities who are going to be looking at creating these rules may conclude reasonably that chiropractors have some education in working with animals, but don't have the same level of education as a veterinarian, not even close to the same level of education as a veterinarian. And that although chiropractors may be qualified to provide animal chiropractic care, they also need to recognize when a veterinarian's intervention is appropriate or veterinarian's treatment is necessary, and to make arrangements for that care, that referral, when it's appropriate. And I think there are also some state regulations or state regulators who are going to conclude that chiropractors should not be adjusting animals unless they are under very close supervision of a veterinarian. So I don't know what the correct answer is in there. I suspect that it's going to be different in different states. It is already and will continue to be so for the near future. And I do hope that as the profession develops a regulatory framework that works well for veterinarians and chiropractors, will become something that becomes a standard from state to state so that we have more consistency as you move from state to state in the rules that apply. And the last question is laypersons. What kind of training should a layperson have before they can provide a chiropractic adjustment? Generally, the veterinarian statutes or the Veterinary Medical Practice Acts will allow veterinarians to delegate almost anything to anybody, whether it's a chiropractor or a layperson. A couple of states do require that veterinarians delegate only to someone who is has some kind of training as a veterinary technician. Um, but many states, most states, do not have that requirement. So a veterinarian can delegate almost anything. About the only thing they can't delegate is the ability to make a diagnosis or perform surgery. And because of that, they could designate or veterinarians could delegate any layperson to perform chiropractic adjustments. And to me, that makes no sense at all. There is no reason that somebody with no training in working with animals should be allowed to treat animals. Um, it just doesn't make sense to me. Now, regulators may disagree with me, and that's fine. But to me, again, the primary goal is to protect the animal, protect the public. And I think you do that best with animal chiropractic by having a team of veterinarians and chiropractors working together to provide and decide what's best for the animal. So what happens if you break the rules? What happens if you're a veterinarian? I'm sorry, veterinarians don't need to worry about this. Because you have a license to practice veterinary medicine, you have a very broad license to practice, so it's unlikely that you would be accused of unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine. Now, you could be accused of assisting somebody to engage in the unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine, and you need to be aware of that risk as you work with animal chiropractors. So generally, unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine, if you're working on animals without a veterinary license and without appropriate supervision or delegation from a veterinarian, the consequences can include criminal penalties, can certainly include injunctions, a cease and desist order to prevent you from doing it again. Certainly, if there is any kind of injury to an animal, you have malpractice liability. And when you commit an act that is illegal, practicing without a license, it's no longer necessary to prove negligence or carelessness. Just because you have broken the statute makes you liable, and the only question will be how much the damages should be. So I want to talk a little bit about the Weissman case out of Minnesota. In this case, a chiropractor's license was revoked for practicing beyond the scope of a chiropractic license by treating animals. Now, this was combined with previous disciplinary sanctions and other violations, but revocation is a very serious penalty that is permanently taking the license away. And in today's world, that means the veterinarian would be unlikely to be able to transfer their license to another state or to practice in another state. But that is one of the possible consequences, is not just criminal consequences or injunctions, but to have your licensing board take some action against your license because you are practicing beyond the scope of what your license allows. Zepecki case we'll talk about for a few minutes here. Veterinarian, because this does involve liability to a veterinarian. Veterinarian referred a dog to a chiropractor for animal chiropractic care. Now, at the time, the law in Arkansas required immediate supervision. In other words, the veterinarian needed to be providing immediate supervision for animal chiropractic to be delivered by someone other than a licensed veterinarian. Veterinarian was not present when that chiropractic care took place. He admitted that he knew that the statute required immediate supervision. And immediate supervision is the highest level of supervision. It means that veterinarian is directly observing and has the opportunity to advise or intervene in the chiropractic procedure. So it's not just being in the same room. It's not just being in the same building. It's being physically there, virtually looking over the chiropractor's shoulder to make sure they are doing this correctly. So the veterinarian also made the mistake of not including the chiropractic treatment in their records. Okay, the veterinarian probably knew they were in trouble because they didn't supervise the chiropractic treatment. And it appears to me, at least, that they maybe tried to hide that by not including any mention of the chiropractic treatment in the animal's record. By the way, the chiropractor was not certified by the AVCA. And as a result, the dog's spine was injured, and the dog was eventually euthanized as a result of his injuries. The veterinarian received a 2-month suspension of their license plus a $3,000 penalty. So the message here is not that you shouldn't work with animal chiropractors, but the message is that when you do work with chiropractors, that you make sure you are following the rules and including accurate records of what occurred so that there's nothing being hidden. There's no appearance that things are being hidden, and that minimizes the risk. and be familiar with the rules, what supervision is required, and provide that supervision and document that you provided that supervision so that you don't run into the situation that this veterinarian ran into.